Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Security Table where we're already having madcap fun as we hit record. So we began with madcap fun and we're just going to continue right along with it. As always, I am joined by Izar Terendash, who appears to be
out of focus.
When he was out of focus and lost and whatnot, but we'll get him back in focus. And Matt Coles, who is dressed for winter.
No, he is ecstatic.
He's ecstatic. Spell that. Ecstatic.
E-static.
EC static.
Yes, that's correct. I was going to say EXSQB.
Tell me you have pets without telling me you have pets.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Since we believe in operational security here, none of us have pets, or maybe we all have pets. You'll never know. Okay. The topic of conversation here is something called the Cyber Trust Mark. I believe I've said that correctly. Cyber Trust Mark, which, it sounds very impressive. Like if you have the Cyber Trust Mark, you are safe and secure.
If you have the mark, you can trust cyber. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You are marked for security.
Don't trust anything, is what they used to say in the 60s. Or don't trust anybody over 30, I think. Or
we've moved on. It's now verify and trust.
Trust and verify has been around since 1980 something as a very popular term. But so what is the Cyber Trust Mark? Somebody lay out, since I just learned about it literally 15 minutes ago, but it turns out I have known about it all along, which is
I always thought that it was our good friend Mark French,
who Mark is the Cyber Trust Mark because we trust him.
So what is the Cyber Trust Mark? It is now officially an FCC program, Federal Communications Commission program for giving information, ensuring the security of IoT devices and providing information to customers that they can use to ensure that they are following security best practices and making use of what the manufacturer or supplier of the product offers. So the Cyber Trust Mark will come with some sort of testing process and a set of criteria and a handy dandy thing that customers can scan so they can get information about the product they're using.
That'd be a QR code?
It would be a QR code. It would be a QR code, and we know how QR codes work. So
no one's ever printed their own QR code sticker and stuck it on a box,
or made a drone QR code that people would scan during some laser light show, and who knows?
Like laser light shows.
Yeah.
No, and clearly everybody knows how to look at the QR code and know if it's a valid one and a new one. Right?
Of course, yeah, because that's readily apparent to the human eye.
But it turns out that this is not new. This is, as you guys were telling me before we started recording, this is just a rehash of UL, which UL stands for what? I forgot.
Underwriter Labs.
Yeah, because I remember years ago when they started on this journey that they were going to certify IoT devices. Well, it's got to be 10 plus years ago when that whole thing kicked off.
It's about that. Well, when it started, yeah, but not when it went into effect.
But did it ever hit?
You're thinking UL 2900 was present for some period of time, got some traction, but I think it's I don't know for sure, but I don't think it's got I don't know if it's still continuing or not. That's a really good question. We should ask somebody or something.
Well, there's much bigger challenges to explore in the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark. So where do you want to go first?
Should we trust Mark? I don't know.
Mark French, I trust. A Cyber Trust Mark, based on the criteria that I've seen so far, I don't know that it makes a big difference in my world.
Well,
so wait.
Go ahead, Izar.
If it doesn't make a big difference on your world, would it make any difference on the world of consumers who are the target of the stuff.
Wait, I'm not a consumer?
You are an educated consumer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're in the upper echelon there of know and care, meaning KNOW, not NO.
Yeah. No care. No care.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good point. It's good
versus
that
most consumers don't know and don't know enough to care.
it's good that we recognize that in this conversation, right? Like we're actually not the target people of this, because you think of the average person who's buying a wireless device, say they're not a tech person, and say they don't really have a lot. They're not good with it. They would self-describe as, I'm not really good with computers. They don't have any ability to choose a product. I mean, I shouldn't say they could randomly choose a product off the shelf, but they don't have any way to differentiate between the security goodness of product A versus product B. Whereas we do, because we would look at all the documentation. We'd read Reddit posts about
we'd watch our favorite YouTuber product review looking at this, right?
Yes, we'd look at multiples of them and compare them and see, is it?
But that user base that you're talking about, it should be relatively easy for them to look at product A and product B side by side and go, this one has a trust mark, this one has a recognition from the FCC, and this one does not. And go, I will prefer the one that has the recognition, for better or for worse, right?
But look at it this way. So what the label is giving us, right? It's a QR code, which you're supposed to scan, and then it's going to give you information about secure configuration of this thing. So now I'm Joe Consumer. I go into Best Buy. I pick up 2 different products. I scan both of them.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to influence my choice here?
Well, I mean, do they both have the mark?
They both have the mark because I had to scan both of them.
Yeah. So then they both have complied with this set of criteria. And so I think in the general consumer's world, they're equivalent.
No, but what does the mark, scanning the mark take you to, right? It takes you to...
I'm guessing just a list of like a certificate that says it was scanned. That's how we've done it in every other certification scheme.
But that's the differentiation here. It takes you to a page with information that has to be easy to understand. Lord knows what that means. And it should include how to change the default password, how to configure the device securely, whether updates and patches are automatic, and if not, how consumers can access them.
Yeah,
the product's minimum support period, end of date. So if I look at both of those, in my mind as a consumer, non-educated one, I'm going to go with, this one looks better and it looks easier.
Yeah, and that's really not solving for anything, right?
Nope.
Because the person who's out there that's going to take this device, they shouldn't do anything to it. Like the mark should result in a product that comes online that is secure by default. I got an idea. Why don't we create a pledge and have a bunch of people sign it? And then they could just kind of self-validate by signing this pledge that they're going to do all the right things. Wait, better at them.
That's revolutionary. Could we get a government department to stand behind that?
Maybe a 4-letter agency.
Maybe.
Would be even better.
Maybe.
I can't think of where.
Maybe you know what? One that has security in the name.
But we have to be security. We have to be we have to be honest, because a bunch of know-it-alls are going to throw shade on it, and we are going to hate it. And
wait, is that us?
Months, I don't know. And months after that, in a poof of smoke, we are going to get notices of CVEs and breaches with companies that actually signed it.
Yeah, I don't know. Could that really happen in the real world?
Could it? I don't know.
No, it could never happen.
I think that it's one of those cases.
Folks, by the way.
Oh yeah, it did. We'll give you more about it later. Yeah. But it's one of those cases where we're going to have companies looking at us and like, did I do that? But yeah, it's traumatic. But on the other hand, okay, so what I'm trying to get at is that Chris, you said that, oh, the QR code should take us to all kinds of certificates and certifications. That's what we've done before. Awesome.
Yep.
So they're trying to do something different here. My problem here is that all this different stuff that they're trying to do, all of it is spoofable.
Well, and the challenge is they're putting the onus on the consumer, which we know the consumer is not going to go through 57 difficult steps of configuring the device. Secure by default means give me the device out of the box, bring it up in its default state. And then if I choose that I want to go configure it and loosen it in some way, that's my choice as the consumer. Now, personally, I don't think you should ever even give them that option, but that's just me.
And that's a great point, because if you look again at what's coming in the documentation, how to change the default password. How about you can't configure this thing without changing the default password?
That's how we solved default passwords
How to
20
configure
years
the
ago.
device? How to configure the device securely? How about not giving the option of it not being configured securely?
Yeah. I mean, I was at Cisco in the days of Cisco 123. And when there was a mass development effort, I mean, this is going back a ways.
Hey,
right?
that is a characters, and it's.
I
But there was a mass.
I just want to say I wasn't.
Yeah. But there was a mass development effort that we went through to remove default passwords from
And now it's
devices.
Cisco 123 exclamation point.
But you had to choose.
capital,
But you had to
capital
choose it.
C, capital
You
C.
had to
Capital
choose
C,
it,
capital
though.
C.
We made it part of the boot up, the installation process, where you had to then choose your password.
And it changes
So-
every 90 days.
But we took out the default password in it, so you didn't. So if you chose to put in a bad password, that was your choice as a user, administrator of the device. It didn't come with it. So we took out the
Bad
ability
user.
for you
Bad
to
user.
have it. But what this Mark is talking about, though, is they're still going to have the default password, but you just have to tell people how to change it. Like, that's ridiculous.
So-
Why would we even bother?
Think about first off, think about the type of devices that we're talking about here, right? These are mass-produced, mass-market devices, potentially, right? They're tens of dollars, maybe hundreds of dollars, depending,
Mhm.
right? And some of them, there are hard to use user interfaces, right? You may have a mobile app that is used to configure the system, and so it has to boot into and it has to boot in such a way you're not going to boot it right onto a network with a UI, right? So let's think about, if you think of like a smart speaker or I guess even a router to some extent, right? You plug that thing in, it has no UI. You have to connect
Yeah.
to it somehow, right? So if it doesn't have a default password, if it doesn't, and I'm not careful here, I'm not arguing that this is
I
a
think
bad or good thing.
I think you're arguing for default passwords is what
No,
I
I'm
hear.
not. I'm just suggesting that there are some challenges with consumer devices.
But you know how most people have taken care of it? Because I did it in multiple devices that I've installed in my house in the last couple of years. They use Bluetooth from the mobile app
Yep.
to temporarily set the thing up we can argue the security nature / architecture of that solution, but it's a proximity problem for an attacker. Like, the attacker's got to be within 500 feet of my house when I'm installing the device.
Right.
So I get
Or-
some
or-
value.
Or trigger power failure so they can, be driving by while your device is resetting. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Even then, once it's set up, it goes into a mode where it'll just reboot, right? Like, you couldn't even drive by and turn the power off and back onto my house and have the device. It doesn't go back into learning setup
Right.
mode. Once it's set up that first time, it goes into its normal. You can hard reset it by pushing a button on the side for 30 seconds, and
Yeah.
then it would come back in that state.
There are
But-
ways
so
to
that
design
means-
these products, right? There are ways to design these products such that it makes it easy to do what we're talking about here. But this requires effort by the designers. And so for a moment, actually, I want to bring this back a little bit. Let's separate the Cyber Trust mark, the label, from the QR code. If the QR code is just an information delivery system here's information for the device, and the Cyber Trust mark is what actually consumers should be looking at to say, this went through some sort of validation process against a set of rules or a set of requirements, then it may be a little bit better. Devil's advocate here. But I 100% agree with Izar and both of you actually, that the rule should not have a default password. It should have a secure setup process, right?
Exactly. And I think that the way that you put it, it becomes like the label that you have on cigarettes, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
There's plenty of testing behind it. There's plenty of science behind it, and people still keep smoking.
Well, even a UL mark. If you look at something like the Cyber Resiliency Act over in the EU, right? It's tied to their regimen, right? And so when you see the mark, it's not UL, but I forget what the specific is.
Yeah.
But when you see that mark on the device, you know it's gone through some validation.
So that's what I wanted to talk about next. So we talked about the Cyber Trust Mark French, and now let's talk about the French Cyber Mark of Trust, which is the Cyber Resilience Act, which is what they're doing in Europe right now, right? And I think that, Matt, you touch exactly on it. They are doing like mandating actual secure by design.
Oh yeah.
Actual things that people should do before their products go out.
With financial penalties to the organization
Exactly.
if you don't.
We all know how good the government is at innovation.
Well,
So
depends
this
on
is-
which. No, but this is not an innovation thing. This is
It's
things
a
that we have known.
squasher. It's a squasher of innovation.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
No,
I'm
it's
going,
not.
No. I'm
Mhm.
going to disagree with you here. These are the things that we have been telling people for how many years? And now the government is saying, hey, you know what? Those guys are right.
But introducing regulation, you're never going to convince me that regulation creates innovation. It just doesn't.
But that's the thing.
Governments of the world
No.
do not create innovation. And if you have
But we are not talking
piles-
about innovation here.
We're
not
talking about bare
innovation.
minimum best practices.
We are talking the innovation happens in the kernel of the thing, into the choppy bits that that give you the service. But
Okay.
we have been for a long time saying, people, there's a number of basic security hygiene things that we need to do. We need you to do, no matter what you're developing. If it's the most innovative thing in the world, if it's the oldest thing in the world, we still need these security things to happen. So now the government is coming and saying, you know what, those guys are right. This thing should happen no matter what you're developing. So this
And
doesn't hit innovation in any way, shape,
and
or
it's-
form.
You're
and it's-
never going to convince me that regulation is an enabler of growth,
So
of product development,
what you're
of
suggesting,
anything.
Chris, though, is that if there is regulation, if companies don't do security on their own, meaning as part of innovation, they don't build these capabilities in.
Mhm.
And the only way to solve that is to create regulation. And that will stop innovation. There's a very big contradiction there. You can never have security, is what you're suggesting.
So let's look at a case study here. Let's look at an example. Okay. Where do most tech products begin their lives?
Taiwan.
China.
From a company perspective, not from a manufacturing perspective, from a company perspective.
Oh, you said their lives.
Startup companies are what is the innovation engine of the technology world. You can say big companies are innovation creators, but they're acquirers of innovation.
Sure.
Most big companies don't. I mean, you can give me a couple of examples.
Well, how big
innovation?
When you say small companies, I mean, a couple hundred employees, a couple billion
So I mean,
dollars in revenue.
if you pick any popular consumer product that's in the market today, and they started as a 1 to 5 person startup company,
Sure, but
10 plus years ago.
Apple. Okay, if you take Apple as an example, right?
I mean, Apple did start with Wozniak and Jobs in the garage, right? Like that
They
was
did,
the other
sure.
guy who sold his shares
But what
for
you're
$100.
suggesting is every company is never. There's no company that is born into the massive
Yes.
giant sized company.
And regulation is when you're a 5-person company trying to build something and someone tells you, here's this regulatory act that you have to comply with, and the penalties are billions of dollars, which it probably wouldn't be for startups,
okay.
but
So CRA specifically is some percentage of your revenue.
percentage of revenue, right? But the age-old problem that we've battled in product companies, all 3 of us have battled this, has been product feature innovation versus security hygiene. And there's always, in the early days of a startup, as much as it pains me to say, there's always got to be a balance. Because if you come in and say, we are a security first company in how we're building this new product, you will more than likely not get to market in a timely fashion to the point where you will more than likely not survive so there has to be a balance. And so my whole challenge with regulation is you're putting potentially a draconian set of rules, depends on how you interpret the rules, on the innovation engine of our world. Now, if you told me that Cyber Resilience Act was a scalable thing that allowed me to build things and grow my maturity as I find product market fit inside of something that I'm building, meaning grow my security. Like I don't have to have everything figured out. Like there's a level 1, a level 2, and level 3. And level 1, if you're under $1 million in revenue, you got to be at level 1, but it doesn't require your own embedded PKI inside of your solution, because that's could be a bad example.
No,
I'm
but
trying to
you
go
know
an example of what I could use.
Chris, you know what? I even if you are right, and I believe that you are right, I'm going to say that I don't care.
Okay.
Because, simply, it's very simple. Perhaps it is time for us collectively to take a breather and say, we've been running a lot towards this market thing and see where we got. Information has almost no value now because people just go and say, another breach, whatever, right? So perhaps it's time to take stock and say, are we doing the right thing here?
And my dream was always that the market would weed out the bottom feeders. But unfortunately, I mean, to some degree it has, right?
At the enterprise level, yes. But
even like think about like doorbells, like smart doorbells that I can buy now. There's one company that owns a big chunk of that market right now, and they're actually part of Amazon now. They were acquired by Amazon, Ring. And you can look at their architecture and and they have a very solid approach to security. You don't see them in the breach of the day type of news of things but
that's because it's their core business. Nobody's going to buy a lock to their houses that doesn't offer that kind of security, even if they are not able to understand it.
So then we don't need a cyber mark if the consumers are that educated about smart.
No, but that's the point. That's the point. That's the expectation. If I'm going to Best Buy now and I'm buying, I don't know, a sprinkler controller. Okay. Dude, what you're going to do? You're going to put more water in my plants or less water in my plants? Yeah, I don't care about security. I don't care about this. I don't care about the other one. Right.
And I think that's the general state of the general consumer doesn't see, we have an unfair advantage.
Right.
But we threat model for a living. And so we see the threats in you and I, all of us would be like, somebody could DDoS this water controller and flood my whole backyard.
Wait, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's the thing. It's not that we see the threats, we see the impacts.
Well, it's a natural threat. You know what the threats are, you know what the impact is.
Right? No. It's a different thing. Because the consumer out there could be more educated about the possible impacts, even if they don't know what the threats are. The threats are a completely technical thing. But a consumer understanding what a piece of hardware that they bring inside their homes could possibly do to their security and their privacy, that's a different kind of education. And that's something that we have never done before.
But my whole point is I want that smart sprinkler to just be secure by default out of the box.
But you want that to be, you want the organization, you want the companies that create that to be self-policing, which is the way it's been.
I want the market to police it ultimately.
Well, who's the market?
That's a free market economy though.
Who's the market here? The consumers or the companies?
But again, that goes to the consumer because they move the market. If the consumer is not educated into what could possibly go wrong, right? Or how bad it is when something goes wrong, then they are not going to influence the market. And that's not going to force companies to self-police.
But now you want the government to put their hand into it. And
what levers do you have? I mean, so, and again, right or wrong here, right? I'm actually I don't 100% agree. I think there is a place for regulation, but as long as it's not a stifler of innovation, but it's a supporter of innovation. And I think that they can go hand in hand. Personally, I think there is some precedence for that. But think about the Ring case that you just talked about, right? So a single startup that was Ring before Amazon bought it. If some savvy consumers decided that, oh, this thing is detrimental to my physical and data health, whatever, it had leaked privacy and allowed, attackers to, walk into my door without getting stopped by the doorbell, right? Or the camera. Not that that's happened or anything. That, as a consumer, you'd have some leverage, right? People say, well, you're a two to 10 person startup, and this product is just getting market share. I'm going to go buy company X and not yours, right? And you have influence. As consolidation occurs, and now Amazon can take a loss on these things, and consumers have less capability to influence the market. So what drivers do you have? What levers are there to influence companies to do the right thing from a security standpoint?
I mean, if the consumers in the market drove the bus here and actually bought products, didn't buy crappy products, then the product, it would fix itself, even for a company as big as Amazon. Because believe me, Amazon owns Ring, and Ring has growth targets for this year that are tied to people buying more stuff and installing more stuff in their house. That's how business fundamentally works.
That's how capitalism and this particular market works, right? Mm-hmm. Again, right or wrong, I'm not going to make a judgment call here, right? If they didn't have quarterly targets, would it matter, right? So if you were just pushing a product and you could take a loss, you could take a beating on it, right? And you didn't care because you had something else propping up your business, right? And Amazon has AWS that probably brings in more money than Ring.
But they don't want to, I mean, business doesn't exist to lose money. So they're not going to they're not going to drop their security guard down and build something they also have a reputation attached to their people use AWS because they trust the security controls and properties that they think they get with AWS. Right?
So that's a particular set of consumers that do that, right? So the consumer who's buying the $10 device from Best Buy or from Costco or whatever isn't the one with leverage, unless you're talking about the entire potential customer base.
You are not going to get to a situation where you're going to open Amazon on a certain product, and on the reviews, you're going to say 1 star, they don't initialize their ID on their keys. That's what
we might.
I wish we did, but I wish we would get there. But that's not coming back to the general consumer, though, right? That's the general consumer. The general consumer just wants something that works.
Matt is thinking about the reviews that he wants to say. Space.
Nobody will understand it. AI will just blot it out.
No, and I'll get a call from their incident response team or their vulnerability response team. Like, you could have reached out to us on Twitter.
Yeah. Security at said company.
We're not going to responsible vulnerability disclosure here.
We're at an impasse. We're going to have to agree to disagree, which
no. I don't think that we are so far. I mean, do you agree that the FDA is saying don't use yellow 360 because it causes cancer on food? It's a good thing.
I don't even know what that is. So pick another example.
Red number 5, right? Some dye that has proven to cause cancer in humans. If the FDA says don't use that, either don't use it or you really shouldn't.
But we're crossing into another.
It's regulation.
It's regulation.
It's medical in nature.
Hold on. Hold on.
Somebody page Adam.
Hold on. Time out. So do we remember the concept of guardrails?
Yeah, I fell off of them.
Guardrails and paved roads, right? Mm-hmm. And regulation could either be a guardrail or a bump, or either a guardrail, or it could be one of those Jersey barrier things that force you into a lane, right?
Mhm.
So we want the guardrails. We want the limits so that people don't, they don't inadvertently go ahead and put something in a product that causes mass death and destruction or privacy loss and data loss. But we don't want to stifle the innovation. We want to allow companies to bounce off of those guardrails without getting seriously, run off a cliff. You don't want the Jersey barrier type regulation. It's what you said.
Which is what most regulation is.
Right. So there's a balancing act, right? We want the guardrail regulation. We don't want the Jersey barrier regulation.
So now we want the government to balance something.
No, we want flexibility. What we want
yeah.
is regulation to be
We
those
know,
guardrails.
we know the government is all about flexibility. I always send them an email on April 14th and say, hey, I'm going to send you my taxes next year. And they never respond.
You take it to a,
That's because you didn't send it last year.
I should have said it 100 years ago.
I know we're going to get a ton of hate mail on this episode, but
I know that we're going to have at least one person in a treadmill out there screaming at the pretty sound.
Okay, so let's bring this back around. That was a fun discussion of regulation. That's really not the issue. Ultimately, cyber, we kind of got a little bit off from
we went off the rails.
Our trajectory. The challenge I see with the cyber mark right now is in just looking at the requirements. And so I got down to page 50 of their release document where I think I found the requirements. And what they're saying is they're using NIST IoT product capability criteria, which is fine. NIST writes lots of good stuff. But the challenge I have with this is I'll give you data protection. Here's what it says. The IoT product protects data store across all IoT product components and transmitted both between IoT product components and outside the product from unauthorized access, disclosure, modification. And then there's a paragraph on cybersecurity utility. The challenge here is we're not talking anything about, there's no, it's like I could protect it, I guess, by Caesar cipher or DES or like there's no standard here that says I would expect a set of product criteria to have a minimum encryption expectation. Like if you're not using AES, I think we can agree. If you're not using AES at this point, you don't care about security because there's really nothing else what else would you use from a crypto perspective other than AES? So why not just say, hey, a minimum barrier to a cyber mark product that protects data is the use of the AES encryption algorithm.
The proper use of the AES.
Well, so now you're suggesting more than just the guardrail, right? So now you're setting a minimum limit, like how tight are the guardrails, right? So use strong encryption versus use this encryption.
I spent a lot of time in my career working in the world of certification. And so I learned a lot about dancing. Because I can dance around a requirement and I can comply with a lot of requirements if you give me room to dance just by the way that I describe what I'm doing and things like that. That's always been one of the challenges in the world of certification is it's not ones and zeros. It's this gray area of, let me make an argument for why I actually comply with this. And so in this case, I think you need something. Who in the world of security is going to argue? Who's going to say, no, we shouldn't use AES. We should use something else.
You're touching upon something else. And it's the important part of what the cyber trust mark is. Trust. What's the value of the label if you don't have that minimum? So in other words, if the goal is consumers need something they can trust, they look at the label and go, I think I can trust this. Well, why are you trusting it? If the label doesn't include using strong encryption, meaning AES 256 or better, then there's no trust, right? It's just a mark.
There's no value in the label either.
Wait. There's one thing that we haven't touched on, and it's important. Apparently, the mark also comes with a check by a trusted lab. Now, we can question the validity of that thing and if they're going to positively check, negatively check, whatever. But they are trying to give a very, very specific value of trust to carrying that mark.
But that's
not
only if the
it's-
rules, that's only if the
Yes.
requirements or the things that they're validating against are meaningful and
Right,
add
but
value
we
to
agreed,
that trust.
but we agreed that they are using NIST, and NIST usually puts out good stuff.
Yeah, but NIST has PQC and stuff. I don't think the lab is going to be looking
But-
at post-chromatography algorithms.
My
You know,
my problem is different. We do know the variation in quality and time that it takes to have a good pen test done. So this lab is probably going to be backlogged until wherever, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to stifle innovation, Chris.
Yeah,
Not,
that's
not
always
the
one
presence
of
of the thing itself.
that
So
creates a bottleneck.
if we look historically, like I said, I worked in certifications, both Common Criteria and FIPS 140 for a number of years. The lab bottleneck could never keep up with the rate of innovation that we were doing. So what did we do? We certified particular versions of software just to get on lists that people use to decide what they could buy. Now, granted, this was at the government level, so we're not. It's a different world. That consumers aren't going to be like, oh well, I can't buy this if it's not on the list. That's the world that we lived in there. But there is value in the independent laboratory performing this assessment. The challenge is they have to automate it in some way. It has to be like.
Well, a lot
I'll
of
give you
this is automatable. I mean, you could write scripts to
Yeah.
check for.
No, I'll give
Do
you
you
a
have an
really
interface that has, hey,
a really
H256, so.
geeky example of something that's really cool in FIPS 140. Okay. It's probably never been recorded on a podcast before, like something cool in FIPS 140. This is really on the deep end of nerdiness. But FIPS 140 has these, I don't know if they do now, they used to, these algorithm tests. And so you basically exposed a testing harness in a test build of the operating system for whatever you were having, whatever was the unit under test. And NIST had this harness, which would then send various combinations of key and ciphertext. And then you had to return the clear text. And they had all these different derivatives and all these different collections of data that they would send in, and this automate tens of thousands of examples.
A
So when you
variation
got to
of
the-
fuzzing.
Yes, but it was, I mean, not so much fuzzing because it was known
Oh, it was a
good
certification
values.
suite. It was a certification
Yeah.
suite. So, yeah.
good values for everything. They didn't give you any junk in it. They always gave you a good key and ciphertext and said, tell us what the clear text is, or different derivatives of that.
Because it has for any given input, it has an expected output.
But what I can say as a 28-year security professional, I trust the algorithms that have been that have been through that FIPS 140 test suite,
Right.
because you can't fake it. There's no way to fake it. It's crypto, right? Like there's tens of thousands of tests that are being run. You could maybe fake some of them, but you couldn't fake all of them to the point. So if something has that mark, FIPS 140, I trust those algorithms coming out of it because I know the rigor that went into it.
Well, so
But
here's the
it's
question. Yeah. So sorry, just to shortcut that a bit. Let's assume for a moment that all the tests that the lab could do could be automated, and based on the information they're providing, it almost certainly could. 99% probably, at least. If instead of having a lab do the testing for these types of devices, these are if these are $10, $20, $30, $100 devices, if you had a certification suite that was posted on GitHub, for instance, as an open source, so it was open as to what the test validation process was and scripts to run it, and companies could self-certify, would it hold the same value as going through a third party?
I would say historically, because there's been self-certification, and that's been an issue. It's been a topic of debate in this world for the longest people have been certifying things. And there are self-certifying programs, even within the US government, for certain types of like communication devices and whatnot.
Right.
You can run your own test suites, and the lab plays a lesser role in the independent. But I think there's still the answer of, can you be trustworthy and non-independent?
Well, so alternatively, if the test suite is open and companies can run, so take a dozen product manufacturers from some country somewhere that want to sell on Amazon, and they go through the test suite and they generate data of their validation. Could they submit to get the mark? And, I'll just go with, hey, by the way, AI can probably take care of this.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
So, maybe that's a way to eliminate the bottleneck of the guardrail regulation, right? Where the regulation can put guardrails so you don't fall off a cliff. Consumers can get some trust out of it. Put a validation process in place. You don't bottleneck it with a requirement through an independent testing lab, and then make it a innovation driving regulation, which still gives a floor to security, which is what we really want out of it.
The one challenge here is, how do you trust the results?
That's why
When you don't-
if it's an open concept of what the validation is, and the data can be generated and submitted for the person or the organization that issues the mark, they could run through a validation of that data.
But,
And there
I
are
mean, you
ways
can
there are
cook
ways
that-
to secure that process.
But you can cook that data, though. That's the challenge, right?
Well,
That's why the independent. That's
Yeah.
why we have independent third-party testing laboratories, is because they're licensed by the whatever entity is they're
Yep.
performing the testing for. And if they don't comply with a set of standards, they get their license gets pulled, and they
Yeah.
can no longer do business in the space that they've built. Right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, those
so they
challenges.
have a vested interest in never cooking anything.
Right.
If anything, they're more strict than they need to be. Is the challenge, right?
Right.
Because their fear is that they're going to lose their license.
I'm getting so depressed here.
That's what we do. here.
The more you guys talk, the more I notice that this whole thing stands on a what's it called? A castle of cards. I mean, we
House
are
of
just
cards.
assuming, we are just assuming trust left and right and up and down, and hoping that people are doing the best thing that they can do because they have to keep their livelihoods and whatnot. While at the same time, we have the data showing variation of all these tests, and we know how they are limited by budget, limited by time, and
Want me to
Yeah, I'm
depress you
depressed
even
now.
more?
We
Want me
need to.
depress you even more.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
So there's a whole bottom 10% of any product market where companies just go and there are places where you can contract with to build you a piece of technology. You just tell them, I want a box, I want it to do this, and I want the cheapest possible COGS or cost of goods sold associated with it.
well,
And so-
that's military logistics, right? You pay the most for the least.
Go to Amazon and search for HD camera,
Anything really.
and you will find one for under $10.
Yes.
And that one that's
Yeah.
under $10, I guarantee you went through that channel I just described, where a company said people want to buy these things and they want to spend the least amount possible. So I can build something that's the biggest piece of garbage that barely does what the thing that they want it to do, with the cheapest components and the least amount of software functionality in it. And I can sell 1 billion of them on Amazon.
Look, I did the other day. I had to reconfigure my. I have one of those Wi-Fi Bluetooth enabled power things.
Things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those things. Yeah.
You know,
Like
the
UPS?
the outlet thing. As you
Oh,
can-
Oh,
yeah.
a power strip.
And
Power
yeah,
strip.
and I use it to not have to get up to my 3D printer to actually press the button and turn it on. So I had to reconfigure it because all of a sudden
the
Google Assistant
epitome-
stopped. No,
Oh, please.
wait, it gets worse. It gets worse. So I had to try reconfigure it because my Google Assistant stopped talking to it and wouldn't turn it on when I tell it to turn it on. So that led me to figuring out that the app that was used to configure the thing in the first place doesn't work anymore. That doesn't support it anymore. Even though there's a QR code on the back of the thing that takes you to Google Market to install the app, right?
Okay.
Of course.
And-
What could go wrong there?
What could go wrong? And while I was checking the open source options to set the whole thing again, I got to thinking about the amount of things that I have here in this office that are connected to Wi-Fi. And what if, by nature of just configuring them, I am actually sending my Wi-Fi password to a big database in the sky somewhere the east of here. And while, of course, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm not that important, I'm not that interesting, and nobody wants my particular Wi-Fi password to do stuff. Once you start having access to those things in volume, then things that gets very complicated and different at the same time.
You are the
I mean,
product.
but that is the ultimate challenge in dealing with personal privacy, is that people are just like, my stuff, I'm not that important or whatever. Okay, then why don't you put a drop of blood on a slide, put that in an envelope and send that to that company?
But wait,
So they have
even
your full DNA.
Even before we get there, now we are jumping into a scheme that, as we said, it's going to put people in Best Buy looking at QR codes and scanning them. And we haven't even touched the threat where somebody just prints a number of those labels and goes to Best Buy and just smacks their own QR code on top
that never
of the QR code.
that can never happen.
Right? And I mean, this whole thing is so harebrained at the end of the day.
I think we got to leave it for now.
Yeah, we touched upon a lot of deep topics.
Yeah, let's let this ruminate for a while. Maybe we'll pay attention to what happens with this over the next number of months, and maybe we can circle back and do an updated conversation a little bit later. But I think for today, I think we have uncovered enough rocks, thrown enough stones, yelled at each other enough for one
and
more.
Getting very,
security thing.
very, very sad about the state of things.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't our intent, but that's just security. What can I tell you? That's where we live and work. All right. Thanks, folks, for tuning in to another episode of the Security Table, whether you're in Dublin, Ireland, or Australia, or standing on a treadmill. We hope you have a great day.